Was a very great power as well, but they were not able to help Poland, even though that they had signed a treaty of protection. Neither were they able to help any of those other countries. And France was equally a very strong country. And since France had fallen, the fear in Britain was that they should just sue for peace and agree to Hitler's term. But then a guy called Winston Churchill took over, and he insisted that England would either stand or they all die. And he promised them hell, that they would fight on the beach, in the skies, everywhere, but that they would never surrender. It took the heart of one man for Britain to withstand a vastly established army, even while they were outnumbered. And England heard and stood. And by that rally, the rest of the world rallied, and the enemy was defeated. But come to think about it, Hitler died at the end of the war in 1945. The account says that he committed suicide. Churchill died at an old age. He was about 90 years old when he died. But the people who suffered were all the other soldiers who died in battle. About 2 million people died. They were the followers. Today, we are going to be talking leadership, but our emphasis will be more on followers, because oftentimes people talk leadership training, leadership quality, leadership this, leadership that, but nobody talks about followers. So oftentimes people don't think about followers. You're thinking about leaders. You are training leaders. You are empowering leaders. You are discussing leaders. But nobody is discussing followers. And it happens every time, even in our home. And mommy and daddy are focusing on leading, but they are not focusing on who is following or whether there is a need on how to follow. You will see seminars about parenting, right? Is there a seminar for children to learn how to follow their parents? It's always about the leader. In companies and organizations, it's about leader. But today, like I said, we'll be talking leadership. Now, your mind might be focused on a leader. But you know what? Leadership is different from a leader. A leader is a person, but leadership is not. Leadership is an enduring process. It's something that keeps going and keeps going. It's never ending. Leaders may die. Followers may change, but leadership continues. Now, even when you think that there is no leadership, there is a certain form of leadership, wherever you see it. Now, as Christians, we need to be concerned about us, that leadership framework. No wonder that the Bible says we needed to pray for our leader, because at the end of the day, when leadership fails, the first set of people who suffer are the followers, right? And our absolute focus today as a tool of knowledge or reference is the Bible, right? I told you that leadership is a process. For every leadership situation, you must have followers, right? As important as leaders you think they are, there is no leader without followers. If you are a leader, and I do believe that the Bible calls us leaders. That's why it says we are the head and not the tail. It pretends leadership. But you know what? You are just a leader when you don't have followers. You are not in a leadership framework, because every leader must have followers. And why do leaders have followers? It's either leaders have followers because of a situation, or that framework is such that it's designed so that it can help a situation. So in every leadership process, you must have three elements. You must have the leader, you must have the followers, and you must have a situation. Just come to think of it. Israel went to Samuel and said, give us a king. Why? Because apparently, from the physical point of it, Samuel's children had failed in executing justice. So there was perversion. And you know, when there is injustice, the pressure is on the people, not on the leadership. And they came to Samuel and said, give us a king. There was a situation. And you know, Samuel, if you know the story, anointed, God told Samuel to heed to their voices, and then eventually he anointed Saul, and Saul went away to his house. He's been anointed a leader, but a leadership process had not been instituted until the men of, I think, Jabesh Gilead cried out because of what the Amorites wanted to do to them. And then Saul rallied the whole of Israel, defeated the enemies, saved Israel, and then people came in and said, where are those people who are saying that Saul should not rule over? Even though that he was anointed by God, chosen by God, but the people made him leaders. That leadership process became instituted when the people came and the leader led, and then they tackled a situation. And like I told you, leadership, followership, situation, they all intertwine. And there is need for us to understand the importance. Now, we'll talk about leadership interaction framework. So, why are there these three elements in the process? Because for leadership to be evaluated, to be studied, to be reviewed, to be viewed, these elements must interact with themselves, right? It would be very funny, for Gio to stand up there one morning and there is nobody in the hall, and then the guy is just talking, People are going to walk in and be wondering, what's going on? Is everything okay? Come. You know what I'm saying? So these elements must interact. And it is when that interaction comes, that is when you have leadership. Otherwise, people are just playing at leadership. A one-time American president described leaders as those who inspire people to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and become more. That's his description of leadership. But you see, today we are not going to be focusing much on leaders. Except that because in this place we are all leaders, right? We pride ourselves to be leaders. If I say, if you know you are a leader, whether now or potentially or in future, raise up your hands. We are all going to raise up our hands. David was just an ordinary, floor member, but in him there was a leader that was yet to materialize. And so, because we are all leaders, I'll just chip in one thing for us to understand. The import of a leader is in the acceptance of the followers. You are nothing. A man once said that power resides where men think power resides. You don't have any power. If men walk out on you, you don't have any power. So leaders must respect their followers. And that's what we do a lot. You take for granted, especially when leadership is by appointment. Oh, you've been appointed. My dear, the appointment is not a rule. It's not a position. It's an assignment. And that assignment, you can only carry it out when you have committed followers. You must understand that. Otherwise, you are walking into a step that leads to an abyss. I give you an example. Joab and his brother were pursuing Abner. Hot chase, hot pursuit. And these were mighty men of war. And then it got to a point that Abner stood and faced Joab. And the Bible said, and the men of Israel stood behind him. And the guy said, why should we keep pursuing each other? And if you read that account, Joab accepted and left. But obviously, the guy was scared. Because he was to kill Abner later on. It shows that it wasn't like he had understood or had forgiven him. He saw men also standing. In the earlier account, it was only Abner that was running. It shows you the power of your followers and why you must follow. Because again, better followership often begets better leadership. That's by at the end of the day, you are going to find out that what will separate a great leader from a weak leader is the quality of followers they have. Now, these followers are not, the quality of followers is not about followers sycophancy. It's not about followers whispering or gossiping, or things like that. No, we are talking about the kind of followers we should be that we are going to be talking about today. Amen. What kind of follower should we become? What kind of followers should we become? For us, remember that when we're in church and we're gathered like this, we are different from every other gathering. The gathering of God's people, the gathering in the name of Jesus is different. If I were to give this same talk, it's a whole day talk, anywhere else, my approach will be different. I'm going to be talking to people without knowledge. If they are not Christians, I'm going to be talking to them differently. I'm talking to the people of God this morning, and my paradigm is a bit different from when I'm talking to the world. We are different. That's why we must be a different kind of followers. You cannot afford to be a hot or cold follower. You are lukewarm. Even God says that he will spew you out of his mouth. We are not talking about followers who are following only for the sake of eye service. Because if you want to be a leader, you cannot lead to lead. You have to follow to lead. Leadership starts from followership. And that's why God would always groom the followers before they become leaders. For every great leaders that you saw, you read about, you heard about, you perceived and understood from the Bible, God always took them through a process of followership. Some of you would think that, Moses wasn't a man of war, and that was why Joshua had to be leading the army. And who says? Moses was brought up in the palace, and Egypt was a mighty empire. In those days, as a prince, they would train you to be better than any knight. Because there was no machine gun. You have to have one-on-one combat if there is a combat. That guy would have been terribly trained. He was an Ajebota, but a strong sword-wielding Ajebota. How would he have led Israel from Egypt to the promised land with all the wahala? So God took him out. And you are never going to tell Moses to go to the wilderness and journey through to Midian. When you hear these things, you think it's just fiction written in the book. Do you know what it means to take a 3-kilometer journey in the desert? You won't see any water. The sands will hold you down. And he traveled more than that. Because that was what God. And then later on, he showed in his heart. David was anointed king. Even though he was anointed king, the guy must have been wondering, why is all this happening? A lot of us would have gone for deliverance. Because you'll be told that there's something wrong with you. You have a good star, but things are not working. The guy was running heta-sketa for 7 years. You don't understand. Do you know what it is for a king like Saul to be after you? That means most towns, villages, and countries around you will happily give you up. There is nowhere to hide. You have to become a follower and leader. Then let's quickly run through. What kind of followers should we become? And what kind of followers should leaders be aware of? I've stated here 5 types of followers. You have the alienated followers. Because even in church, I used to, when I'm debating with my wife, I used to say, you know what? The church is not just a place where people are worshiping and are rejoicing and are happy and everybody is holy and we are all righteous. This is also a learning ground. Otherwise, what is iron sharpening iron for? If the iron is already sharp, why are they sharpening it? So don't feel bad if you are not the leader you think you want to be, or the kind of follower you want to see. This is a learning ground. As we talk and we learn, as we interact and we exchange, we become better. So I said that leaders need to be wary of alienated followers. These people, remember that a leader cannot control the follower that he has. Right? You don't have control over the type of followers, the type of people that follows you, especially if you are an appointed leader. You're appointed as a manager or a sales leader somewhere. You don't have all this stuff. You can't control them. You can't decide that immediately. People will just follow you. Now, if you are a chronic leader that had established himself as an inner man, you can't even determine, especially for religious leaders. Everybody comes to church anyway. You can't ask anybody away. But you can choose the leaders you follow. Sometimes it's easier for followers. I don't have to follow you if I don't want to. As tough as Hitler was, there was those who conspired, who wanted to overthrow him. They weren't following. Rehoboam would tell you the story. If you do see him, I don't know, it depends on where you be. If you do see him, he would say he understood that people can choose not to follow you after Solomon died. So it shows you that you have all kinds of followers, so don't feel bad. Now, there are those who, alienated followers are all of those who are only concerned about the negative aspect of the leadership process. They are not part of the process. They are not part of the drive for the goal, because I explained earlier that leadership is an interaction between leaders, follower, and a situation. And that situation can be a goal, can be a place, can be a destination, can be a purpose, can be an objective. Alienated followers are alienated from. My question to them today, if I saw them, is why are they following? If you don't want to leave Egypt, why did you leave Egypt? Why are you stressing Moses? You are looking for the guy to make mistake. And every time there is a situation, oh, why did you bring us out of Egypt? Those are alienated followers. Why are you following him? You have the right to follow. Leaving Egypt was not by force, it was by choice. Nobody was tied and dragged out of Egypt. And it's so with this place, with every other place, with every other company. A lot of people are working for company and they are criticizing the company every day, from their boss to the MD to this. What I always say to them, when you are tired, get out. Stop talking. Now we have the conformist follower. These are the yes people. They don't do any more good. Because, you know what? Every human has a certain weakness. And great leaders understand that. In that, they need to tolerate those who say no to them, because every man has his weakness. You hear the story about what Solomon did. Of all the good works that David did, you had the perversion, the idolatry. And in my mind, I'm asking, where were all his men? Where were his advisors? The guy did a lot of things. Marrying wife, nobody could say that, hey man, come here, stop marrying these people or stop doing it. Nobody could talk. The guy obviously had the yes people around him. And where did he lead him? What Rehoboam wanted was what his fellows advised him. Because that's the kind of leader he had. And they also said that your leadership as a leader, your trait will determine the kind of people who follow you. David was a mighty man, and he had mighty men follow. You think it was only David that killed a Goliath? Several of his mighty men also killed people just as huge and as strong as Goliath. So people like to say yes. I have been in meetings where things are agreed, and then the people are very supportive, and they say yeah, and we are just going out of the meeting, and they are turning and saying to each other, it won't work. It happens in boardrooms, in everywhere, even in church. Some people do not agree. They have a different opinion, but they assume that the leader would like me to agree anyway. So let's just agree. It doesn't take the leadership anywhere. It's taking it into a place of doom. Hitler committed a lot of atrocity, especially against the Jews. But the brain behind that was a man called Joseph Goebbels. He was the driver of that process. It's Hitler that you were seeing, but it was the hand of Goebbels. Now, after Hitler committed suicide, he transferred power to Goebbels. That's the shortest reign ever. The guy reigned for only 1 day. The next day, he committed suicide. Because your sins will find you out. Leaders need to be aware of the yes people. You need to really extray them. In fact, when you have a meeting where everybody says yes, there's something wrong. Because human beings are inherently different. And God doesn't have any problem with that. In fact, he created us to be different. With different concepts, different ideas, different fear, different passion. That's why we are different. As our faces are different, our content and our structures are different. You can't have people agree with you 100% of the time on 100% of the issues. There's something wrong. Even your children disagrees with you. Only that a lot of time you don't hear it. You don't hear the disagreement because you're not listening. Now there are the pragmatic leaders, followers. Pragmatic followers. They will do all the work. They'll be quiet. They don't want to be known, but they are not really interested in your goal. They are just working for efficiency purpose. Maybe there is a job, and the guy wants to earn his money anyway, so he works. But he really is not interested in where you are going. He's a leader. He's a follower. It's okay. They'll be useful for certain area, for certain things, but that person hasn't reached there yet. We're still going to talk about the followers that we should be. Right? So when you see expertise, the guy knows how to do, you are in a company, the guy knows how to fix car tires. That's all he cares about. That's what earns him his money. The guy is a pragmatic guy. If you wake him up in the middle of the night to fix tire, the guy will fix it. But tell him to, please close the gate. The guy will say, I'm not the gate man. He's good, he's strong, but he's limited and myopic. Now we have passive follower. I will just say one thing about passive follower. If you check the dictionary, you see the word passive. It's the opposite of active. Guy is just there. May even look lazy. The guy is not. Those are the people in the offices that they are not really bothered about self-development or learning new things or speaking out or going out of their way to do something because they don't want to get involved. In fact, they are so good that they don't even want an argument. If you are being like, okay, and they walk off. They don't. Their contribution, their actions, their behavior is totally passive. but they are in the midst of followers, right? Now, I would ask you something. What kind of follower do you think Ahithophel was? You don't know. So no problem. I'll ask you tomorrow when I see you tomorrow by the staircase. But prepare yourself. I can ask you anywhere. If I see you on the staircase or in the loo or anywhere, I would ask you. And if you don't know it, you won't go home that day. I'll take you through all the 4 steps of leadership again or followership again. Now, our call this morning is exemplary followers. Okay. And my chronic example is David. Now, I hear people talk about leaders who had been followers at the point. People talk about Alexander the Great, Churchill, um, FDR. We talk about John Kennedy. Talk about all kinds of leaders. Nebuchadnezzar the Great, Belshazzar. A lot of leaders, both out and inside the Bible. But I don't hear people talk about David much. But for me, that's the greatest leader that has been. The guy led a country that was marginal, but conquered territories and conquered countries. And he never lost a battle. Now, David started as an exemplary follower. Sometimes they don't agree with the leaders, but they are committed anyway. Because for them, it's not about the leader. It's about the goal. It's about the situation. It's about the purpose. So where are we going? What are Christians supposed to be going? Where are we supposed to be going? Once the leader is deviating from that goal, exemplary followers will disconnect. But they are with that goal, with that leader continuously as long as they are following the goal. Those are exemplary followers. They are not necessarily like the leader or have his trait or have his character, because that's the mistake a lot of leaders make. Our mentors make all the mistake. You feel you want to pour yourself on the person. No, my dear, the person is different. He may pursue the same goal, but he may pursue it differently, because we are structured this differently. Mentors will want you to do everything, even want to teach you how to eat. That's not what is expected of an exemplary follower. It's the commitment to the goal that differentiates them. These are the people who you may think they are not loyal to any man. But if you are a leader, pursuing a goal, driving for a purpose, and you have a follower that is absolutely committed to the purpose, eventually you will know that the follower is following you. Because you and the purpose are one and the same. You are the leader. You are not in the crowd. You are outside the crowd. So an exemplary follower does not have to agree with you all of the time. He's the one who says that, you know what, I don't agree with this stuff, but okay, let's do it anyway. Joab, unfortunately, shot himself in the foot and he had to die. But I think he was a great follower. Remember when David wanted to take the censer? The guy told him that, why do you want to do this? But the Bible said David's words prevail. And the guy went ahead and did it anyway. But look at the result. 70,000 people died. David didn't say it, but I know in his mind he would have been saying that, this guy told me. I suspect that it was because of Joab's commitment and loyalty that David couldn't bring himself to execute him. In those days, kings were very powerful. By their words, people are executed. But you see, he left Joab alone, even though he did a lot of things that he didn't agree with. Joab was the one who executed Uriah by action. But within it, there wasn't anything written about he became angry with David. He was ready to commit murder for the cause. Exemplary followers are essential to our success wherever you are. In our homes, in our marriages, in our relationship, in our schools, in our churches, more so in our churches, because a lot of time there is no inherent physical gain. It's just a drive towards that purpose that we are all driving towards. Now, exemplary followers do not act based on preferences. They act based on convictions. This is the goal and I want to follow it. It's not whether I prefer the method or not, but I'm convinced that we are driving the same goal. Now, quickly, in the next 5 minutes, we'll just talk about what leadership should be aware of. We've talked about followership. Everybody who is following will lead at a point. Now, in order for you not to lose your followers, or preempt your followers, or lose the battle from day one, a lot of times when you appoint leaders, they see followers. But remember that you don't even know the followers. Take your time. Because followers will follow based on influence. Right? And as a new leader, you don't have any influence. So they just made you the head of your usher. And then you are resuming that first day of work. Hey, all your ushers come here. People are going to look at you and say, is he okay? He doesn't have any influence. Or a new, brand pastor comes up and they say, okay, all of you kneel down. You were late. The guy doesn't have the influence to drive that. You have a new manager who is in the office. Because you often hear people say that, could you do that to Dele when he was manager? Are you serious? Dele had been managers for 5 years. You are just coming yesterday. You want the same thing. Leaders must understand that there is a process of gaining influence and it's time bound. So you're going to stand as a stranger to most of your followers. And then you become an acquaintance. As they study you, as they see where you're going, you become like an acquaintance and then they are following you. But by the time that relationship, that leadership interaction mature, that's when your influence begin to speak. So don't say, I hate these people, they are not following me well. Because you don't even know them, you're new. In there are all the 5 elements of followers. Now, what is the job of a leader? It is to ensure that all followers become exemplary. Right? Jesus Christ showed us that example. And people would often say that David took a burning away from death and all of that. And look at what they became at the end of the day because of somebody who believed and took them through. Now, if you look at the apostles of Jesus Christ, all the 12 of them, they were not skilled people per se. Right? They were nobodies. But out of patience and everything, he led them through. Now, leaders must understand. I'm not going to go through everything today. It's not relevant. It's something that you can know. But I will just talk about 2 things. Leaders must understand that even though that people are following, you need to know the kind of followers you want. But those followers may not exist immediately. You need to extract that trait from your followers. Remember that you cannot decide who is following you. And how do they do that? It's by gaining credibility. Let people accept you as a leader. It gets to a point where before you wink your eyes, those guys have gone into action. Because when your followers become exemplary, your job becomes easy. That was why David was resting when his men were at war. Right? And the key element of gaining credibility is to produce. Every other thing hangs around that. Even God said, I did not call the descendant of Jacob to a fruitless service, or saying to seek me for nothing. Every leader must produce. And we have leaders here. You think followers are following me because I can give them food? Of course, you are supposed to give them food. Why are you worried that they are following you because of food? Somebody will follow you because of something. Understand that and enjoy it. All leaders must produce. You must produce in terms of capacity building, in terms of leadership, in terms of physical production, in terms of justice. Justice must reign. It's a production to some people. The most things that fails leader is when injustice permeates that leadership interaction. It happens at home. So you are favoring one child over the other. Something is bad only by who did it, not by what it is defined with. It happens in our work. It happens in politics. My shock is that it's happening in churches. That something is white only because somebody else was involved. So something is not good only because APC was the one who did it. Or only because PDP was the one who did it. Justice must permeate a leadership process. I'm praying that leaders will understand this, followers will understand what the Lord expects from them. As Christians, we don't have any options. You are either an exemplary follower or you are no follower at all. Look at all the followers of Jesus Christ. They all marched to their death. And the Bible says they loved not their lives. They all marched happily to their death. Graciously. Those are the kind of followers we need to become. May God help us in Jesus' name. Praise the Lord. I understand that there'll be a few questions.
We have 5 types of followers. Is it possible for a leader, are there things the leaders can do or a leader can do to actually convert, say, a passive leader, a passive follower to an exemplary follower? 1. And 2, is it possible that a follower can change from one kind of follower to another? And what can the leader do, basically?
Answer to that question is in 2 forms. Now, to answer it holistically, I must warn you, as a leader, not everybody is going to follow you. And that's also a good trait of a leader, to know those who are actually following you. And you cannot know it except by interacting and constant interaction with your people. That's why parents often will lose their children, because they weren't following anyway. So all followers will not follow you. And to answer his question, yes, a passive follower can become an active follower. Remember that I took you through how a leader starts. It starts as a stranger, an acquaintance, and then there is maturity in that relationship. Most times, a lot of leaders are passive, a lot of followers are passive followers for starters. They just appointed you as the head of a department. Some people are jealous. Some people don't even think you can do it. They are just, okay, let's see what he will do. But as a leader, you need to rally everyone, because you don't have a choice of those who are following. Become the leader to the person. People sometimes need to build capacity. Sometimes people don't know what to do. People came to Jesus Christ and say, what shall we do? Sometimes people don't know.